Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone around the world who's joining us today. And welcome to a step-by-step guide to delivering webinars that win customers. My name is Keith Ellis, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of SpeakerPoint. But, quite candidly, today I'm doing a favor for a friend. The guys at Modern Analyst, Chris and John, they approached me and said, listen, can we partner? Let's deliver value. Keith, you've been doing so many of these webinars. You're great at it. Can you share what you know with our customers and some of our business analyst friends out there who are really interested in this area? And, I believe in paying it forward. Let's do that. I think it's a fantastic thing that the guys over Modern Analyst did, and I think it's kind of neat to support that. Certainly, I've done a huge amount of webinars in my time, and I think today, one of the big things I want to talk about is really the foundations of thought leadership. When you're driving a customer or you're driving a company, you really need to focus on thought leadership. Today's customer is very, very sophisticated. Today's customer is self-educating and they want to find you. But I think when you're dealing with webinars, even when you're dealing with personal presentations, you really need to think about it differently. You need to think about it from the perspective of you are competing for every second of time. Today, you're all busy, right? Everybody on this line is busy. And I'm competing for every second of your time. You're doing this or you're doing something else. And so what I want to do is talk with you about that. Now, I know we have a real mixture of people on the line today. I see some really sophisticated people in the marketing functions of organizations around the world. Hopefully from this, you get a couple of great ideas. You'll take them back and say, wow, that was wild. Let's see if we can do that. If you're new to webinars, what I want you to do is see this as a bit of a step-by-step thing. And it's going to be that you walk away saying, this is doable. Don't try to think of thought leadership marketing as trying to come up with something that's going to revolutionize the world. Think of it as taking some baby steps in the right direction and then just doing an amazing job of it, okay? By the way, this session is for you. Use the Q&A area, okay? In fact, try it now. Go into the Q&A area and just tell me where you're dialing in from, because this is interactive, all right, guys? This is really for you. It's a small enough group. We only have about 100 people dialing in today. And so as a result, I can try to take the questions in real time. I'll try to answer them as I go. And what happens is that if I miss it, I'm going to commit to getting back to you with an answer before the, maybe not before the end of the week, but certainly coming back. Hey, Greg, how are you from Edmonton? There's my boss. So I'll try to pick them up by the beginning of next week or something like that if I come back. Now, I'm also going to break every single rule in the book in terms of what it comes down to in terms of the way I've designed my slides. These are very dense. And the reason why they are is because this is really a guide. You're going to take it away. If you really want my slides, I'll send them to you. Just send me an email at the end. And it's a guide for you so you can have your own checklist and things like that. Look, I'm an experienced tech executive. I've been around a long time. I've run a lot of different companies and things like that. But, I'm typically on the growth side of an organization. I'm very experienced in this whole area of thought leadership marketing. I encourage you all to really engage and volunteer. Pay it forward like we're doing today for the guys at Modern Analyst. I think it's a wonderful thing. A lot of you are business analysts on the line today. I'm the chairman of the board for IIBA. And so I also see this as part of your own, skill building out there. This is something that is, foundational to just doing great presentations. And welcome, Harsh. It's, also cool mode in life, when your daughter sees you graduate. I graduated from Lancaster University in the UK very late in life. And I think so much of being, part of delivering webinars and things like that, just be very curious. And Harsh, absolutely. If you want to connect, anybody here wants to connect on LinkedIn, just send me a note. Let me know where you are coming in from. Now, why I'm doing this today is webinars are so critical to a thought leadership strategy. At one point in my life, I had about 60,000 people annually attending my webinars. This happens to be 10 of them that we did with the guys at Modern Analyst. And you can see one of the highest ranking speakers ever. I think the highest ranking speaker ever for their organization. And I think on this particular, if you add it up, it's something like 45,000 people came in to these 10 alone. And we did a whole lot more with the group. So I've done many dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of webinars. And so, the world of marketing has changed. It's totally backward from what it used to be. It used to be that you could hardball selling and stuff like that. But today, the market is very different. The market is very self-educating. It's a sophisticated, it's an impatient buyer, and you are competing for every second of somebody's time, right? And I want you to think about that. It changes the way you do what you do. It changes the way that you go about talking with people, and particularly around thought leadership strategies. It really changes. Now, and it's because you need to start thinking about what's in it for them when they attend. It can't be simply coming in and doing a demo or something like that online. So what I'm going to promise to talk to you about today is really some tried and tested step-by-step stuff. I want you to take this away and be able to build a webinar as a result. I want you to come out of this thing and say, hey guys at Modern Analyst or wherever, let's look at ways that we can generate business together, because this is a way of doing it, and I now see why I was not generating leads in the past. I wasn't generating closable business. I want to revolutionize your thinking on how you're going to build revenue. That's like setting the bar really high, right? Like when you think about marketing, it's like set your big hairy goal, like out there. So, but I want to show you this is actually much easier than you thought, right? So people get in their own way sometimes, and what I want you to do is get out of your own way and say, what you know is unique and interesting and valuable. You just need to frame it in a certain way, and then that allows you to generate leads. I also want to cover what content sells, right? Because it's a big issue in terms of balancing promotion. People think, hey, let's do a webinar and I'm just going to demo. It doesn't really work. Or it's this great big ad and that doesn't really work. Or it's somebody else presenting their content and it's got nothing to do with what you're selling. That doesn't really work. I need you to think about this as kind of a line that you're going to follow. And it's a very careful line that's much more part of the customer journey when you look at that. Let's talk about content marketing versus thought leadership, okay? Content marketing is very much, I'll call it bait. It's like clickbait, all right? And it's measured by clicks. What you're really putting out there is articles that don't have a lot of depth, but they got great titles. And you're getting people to click on them. But when you're in thought leadership marketing, if you're publishing stuff that doesn't cause people to stop and think, if they haven't learned something, if you haven't spurred discussion or created inspiration, you're really potentially creating more of a negative brand image. And so I want you to think about the difference between content marketing and thought leadership is really that impact on mind, okay? It's about, have you created an experience for somebody? Have you created an interaction? Have you caused them to pick up something that's different, right? Versus are you publishing on an area where you've got keywords that are important? And that's massive for you when you're driving these kinds of things, because it's a very simple distinction, right? So when you're building the webinars, what ends up happening is that sometimes people end up with something that's actually boring by design, right? It's irrelevant or turns off the audience. And you know it as you're delivering. It's, my God, I'm stuck reading my slides. And so what I want to do is I want to kind of revolutionize that. I want to change the way you go about doing it. And I want to talk to some fairly specific techniques in here about what you can do and how you do it and why you do it that way. Okay. Now, I'm also breaking a lot of rules when I'm doing this, because you'll see a lot of density on my slides. But that's because I want you to take them away and I want you to use them afterwards. A webinar attendee wants three things. Okay. They want interesting and relevant content. In other words, what's in it for me? They want a passionate speaker. Does that make sense? Like, you can get through a lot of stuff just by being very passionate about what you're talking about, right? And it'll convert. So very boring content, very passionately driven. Hey, it's interesting, right? But they also want to feel engaged. They want you talking, right? So I encourage you, ask questions, because they want to feel engaged. They want to be able to ask those questions along the way and have you respond back. And that's really what the dialogue is all about, right? So when you think about a presentation that you're delivering in person, you're going to engage that person directly, and they're going to come up to you afterwards and talk. But in a webinar, you're going to do that in real time as you go. There's some general rules of the webinar road, and I'm not going to read every single one of them, but I want you to think of this as a conversation with a friend at a party, okay? Take your business and think about how you'd explain it to a friend at the party. If you come off, pontificating to that person, you're going to bore the hell out of them, right? So think of it as, you're at a party, you're going to make sure that what you're talking about is relevant. It's interesting. It's related to the person that you're talking to. You're speaking using examples that are clear. You're human, right? You're not arrogant about it. And you're very simple in the way that you describe it, right? That applies to a webinar. I want you to think about doing a webinar as talking to a friend. First and foremost, if you do that, you will deliver 10 times better stuff. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to make it actionable, okay? And so by actionable, what I mean is that if that person walks away with some things that they can do differently as a result of attending, they're going to come back for more. Make sense? And so the thing is that when you're marketing, you really have to make sure that those people continue to come back. They want to hear more and more messages from you, right? That's what it's all about. The webinar is not just about delivering a message that's relatable. It's about delivering a message that's actionable. I can use that information and I can act differently. And as a result of acting differently, I'm going to talk to you, right? And hopefully buy. Here's the second thing people do wrong, okay? They don't connect the webinar topic to the product experience, what it is, and they don't think of it as a customer journey. Like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do a webinar, and by doing a webinar, you're going to hear my content, I'm going to follow up, there's going to be selling going on, and you're going to buy my product, okay? People don't think of this. They just think of this as, I can generate names, right? Or you know, I want content that's amazing. Wait a minute now. You got to connect all those dots, right? And so I've got three things. Make your topic relevant, interesting, and topical. What do I mean by that? Relevant is it solves a problem. Interesting is it seems actionable. Topical is like, why now? Be clear in your mind, why now? Does that make sense? Cool? You like that idea? Because you can need to line that topic up with the rest of your customer journey, right? Meaning that when I deliver the content, I need to be thinking about what's my brand, what's my quality of my brand, right? The authority, the knowledge of the outcome. Those three things, or four things, sorry, I wish I could count, are labeled down below. Design and conceptual research proof, that sort of stuff. And then follow-up is respectful and emotional, the tone and offering knowledge. But you have to line the whole thing up. Does that make sense? If you don't, what happens is you get a broken process, right? You're talking about stuff that's not related to your product, right? Or you're talking too much about your product and you're not talking about content that's relevant and interesting, and people don't connect the dots, right? And as a result, you're not really talking thought leadership. You're talking something else. And so what I want to do is just say, think of it always, always, always as a customer journey. It starts somewhere, people are excited about it, and then you take them somewhere, right? So how do you do that, right? Because great marketing is also about storytelling. And this is one of those ones that I want to take extra time on. I'm going to stop and I'm going to tell you how to do this. What I want you to do is and this is the one slide, take notes on it, okay? Define the gap. In your product, doesn't matter what it is, right? Even as a business analyst, if you're attending, what's the gap? What is it that that person that you're working with cannot do themselves? What can they not do? So if you're a software company, right, and you're selling business analysis software, what is it that they can't do by themselves? It's not that they can't manage requirements. They could do it in an Excel notebook, or they could do it in a, something else, right? But what is it they can't do themselves? And I want you to take a rubric, right, and say the way it is done could be great or it could be poor. Why? Right? Why is it that doing it one way? What did you do that blew yourself up, right, when you did it one way? But then you had this great learning, and then, this is how you do it. And then prove that it works, have that emotional benefit and that ROI benefit. People buy for very emotional reasons, right? The ROI is a justification to the passion of the heart that causes the purchase to happen. Think of this as a plot line. Your company helps them with something that they can't do for themselves. There's a way they could do it well or poorly, but if they do it well, here's why that works. You see how that's a very simplistic plot line, okay? Very simple plot line. Is that cool for you? Does that make sense? It resonates? Jerry, thank you for popping in. Yeah, I love it, So that's good. So when you look at this type of thing, and I want you to relay it to your own company, okay? So first and foremost, I want you talking to a particular person. So a lot of you here are going to be product managers. I'm not sure, David, where you're coming from, or Hassan, where you're coming from on that one, but let's assume you're more project management executive, you're wary of bad webinars, you're curious, you might have to do one, maybe you need leads, and you're a capable speaker. Let's assume that that's your person. That's who I'm talking to today, okay? Make sense? Does that fit any of you on the line here today? I'm dealing with a lot of clients. There you go, Hassan, fantastic, okay? So it makes sense, there you go. So when you are that persona, what are the challenges that you get into, right? And Hassan is laughing because he's understanding, hey, I'm answering in real time as he's talking to me. What's the gap, right? A person who is in that project management role has two things. One is time, like, oh man, I don't have time to put together a webinar, right? But really, the flip side of that is I'm terrified it'll be lousy content. Because if I knew it was going to be great content, it'd be no problem. I could pull that together, right? Because I know I'm going to get the outcome, right? The flip side is that if I've done leads for them before, like I've done webinars before and the leads didn't convert. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm doing today, right? Is how can I focus in on, helping you build content that really resonates with people and help you build content that converts into sales opportunity. Is that cool? All right. So that's this webinar. That's what it's really about. That's how I chose what we're going to talk about. What's the gap that you probably want to focus on? And then we have to say, well, how, right? How am I going to speak to that content? And so you, for your own product, you're going to say, well, let's say it's like SpeakerPoint, right? Which is our company. We have a software product that's focused on really bringing this mass integration, bringing all of those individual spokes of your technology together into kind of this one seamless thing. It's fantastic. So that's the gap, right? How do you do that? We can speak to the how of that, right? Now let's talk about how you can do it poorly and interestingly, right? So poorly, you can take that technology and you do these one-to-one integrations, right? So in here, how could you do that better? Well, obviously that's through our software. And here, if I'm talking about competencies, I want interesting and lead generating. That would be great content for you guys, right? Versus if I just sat here and gave you public speaking tips and design style ideas, what would happen? You're saying, well, look, I don't really do a lot of public speaking, so that's interesting, but it just makes me feel inferior, right? Or if it's design and style ideas, it's like nobody here is really into that. You know what I mean? So it make it feel harder for you to do. And so as a result, it makes it harder. So you see how the content here is just thinking about it from the perspective, what does that customer want to experience? And then focus in on the outcome, okay? This is subtle stuff, but it's very, very important. And the reason why I have your product example there is think of the gap, think of the competencies, think of the outcome for a user, right, as you go through this. Does that make sense? That's cool? You like that idea? All right, there we go. We have a couple of people say, yeah, okay, it's neat. And so if you have examples or questions, then come on back and just ask me those. So what's different in a webinar versus public speaking engagement? Okay, first of all, there's a massive time difference because the impact has to be immediate. It's modular. It's a show, right? So if your audience is bored at all in a webinar, they will leave. They will leave. In a in-person event, there's a little bit of a barrier about me getting up in the back of the room and walking out. Like I feel rude doing that. Here, like they're just going to leave on you. The second thing is you got to have mental breaks, all right? And I immediately went into this because I'm betting every single one of you is going, oh man, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now. Is that true? A lot of people say, oh man, that was a little overwhelming, that last stuff that you gave me. Make sense? Is that true? Jerry, thank you. Yes, you're reinforcing that. Yeah, I feel a little overwhelmed. You need to have some mental breaks when you build it in because you're delivering a lot of content, you're delivering it fast, you need to have title pages or fun slides to give people that mental break. Let their brain catch up, right? Because if you deliver a lot of content, you're delivering it quickly, you're going to lose some people. You also need to virtually identify the few highly engaged, and that's harder to do. So part of that is speaking in the customer voice, meaning you interview your customers, you use their exact wording, it'll create higher resonance, but you need to use the audience, use that interaction with the audience, right, to understand who's most interested in your content. Right now, Hassan outnumbering everybody else in terms of the number of questions coming back, and as a result, he seems just much more engaged. So it's, that part of it is what I'm getting into. But Jerry, I've heard from him a couple of times. David kicked in a couple of times, and so people come back and forth. And I haven't heard from her yet. You know what I mean? So when you get into it, you're looking for that, connection with people as you go along. And Greg will see him chime in at some point in time along the way. The next thing I want you to do is think about registration. Okay, when you're registering for a virtual event, there are certain tactics that work well, certain tactics that don't. My first suggestion on the title, for example, was using webinars to generate high-quality leads. Kind of boring, Chris and the guys at ModernAnalyst come back with step-by-step guide and 6 tips for fantastic. Media companies are wonderful at this. You need to be topical and catchy without being kitschy. Okay, does that make sense? It's like that really thin edge of the wedge. The next thing is that and then work with your media company, come up with a good name, that's what they're there for. But also I find that certain tactics work really well. You have to be very clear on the product statement. What are you trying to solve? So if you look at that title of today's webinar, very clear problem we're trying to solve, right? It's also answering the why now. Hey, look, people are selling remotely, but you also have to have one wow in the credibility statement. Too often people end up, there's this big long thing about who the speaker is, and there's nothing but what the content is. And so it creates problems. And the last thing I'm going to encourage you, and this is why it's in bold, do not use huge numbers of registration fields. I've seen webinars where you got to fill in 10 bloody fields. It's ridiculous. Don't do that. You will cut your audience, like, I don't know, by a third if you did something like crazy like that. Don't do that. A couple of fields, you can follow up later and figure out more about who they are. Like my slide? You got a really balanced promotion education here, guys. Okay? It's a balancing act. You're always talking about a company. You're always talking about your stuff, right? You're always talking about your stuff. People need to come in and realize that it's a sales pitch, okay? But if they sit back and it's in your face too much, it's a sales pitch, right? Then it's going to be a problem. People are going to get annoyed at you, right? So I want you to really look at these two pictures. You know, one's a cat balancing on the pillar. The other is a cat that's clearly fallen off and he's got the balance wrong, okay? But what makes these two pictures so vastly different? It's really the context of the background, right? That first cat, if you had him on a couch, it would be a boring picture. It's really about the context of what's going on around him, right? So when you're doing a webinar that's got good balance, you're creating such a great story and information around them, around your company, that it's the stuff that's going on around. I have no idea how that cat got up there. I have no idea where this came from, but man, that looks dangerous, and I wouldn't want to be that one, right? So it's the context of that picture that makes it exciting. The same thing is with a webinar. It can have your company at the center of it, but it's really painting the picture of the industry and what's going on and how you're. The other one is just all about the cat. It's interesting, but it's just all about the cat. It's just all about you. It's all promoting you, and that's no good, right? It's not thought leadership. Does that make sense? It's subtle, okay? Does that make sense? Cool. I've got a few people. Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you very much. Okay, now let's make a webinar delivery engaging. I promised you 6 tips, so you can count them, and then that way for sure I deliver it. You can send me your cranky email at the end if I didn't get all 6 of them, all right? So first and foremost, get the basics right. And I'm going to actually, bug Tracy. I don't know if Tracy's on the line today, but, let's get the basics right. The first thing is you need to have about 2 minutes a slide, right, that you're kind of running through at. You need to, if you speak too fast, you'll get fewer questions. That's what's happening today. I'm actually speaking very, very quickly. As I slow down, I get more questions because it has more time for your brain to catch up. Right now, I'm going so fast because I want to get through to some of this stuff right here, right, versus speaking slowly, right? The next thing is I want you to resist the urge to script what you're doing. This is all about a conversation with a friend. You don't script conversation with your friend, right? Think of it as a couple of key bullets. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of fun with Tracy. You there, Tracy?
I am.
You are? Okay, so here's what I want you to do.
Okay.
You know how you're on a laptop, right?
Yes, I am.
See how the dude is sitting there?
Yes.
Okay. I want you to sit like that. That's how you normally sit all day, right? Sit like that, and I want you to read, the second and third part. Okay? Just any of the slides. Just start reading.
All right. This dude will sound boring because of how he is sitting. Posture radically changes your vocal tone.
Okay, stop for a second. Now what I want you to do is I want you to put your butt back. I want you to put your chest out, put your neck up, chest out further, okay?
Uh-huh.
I want you to read it again.
This dude will sound boring because of how he is sitting. Posture radically changes your vocal tone.
You see what happened there, guys? Yes? She was much more interesting in that second one, right? She sounded much more engaging. It's a subtle thing, but it radically shifts it. All you have to do is change how you're sitting, right? And it will make you sound interesting. So there's real subtlety to the way you do a webinar. And part of this is just that people have their laptop in front of them, right? And so the vocal tone drops. It sounds very boring. It sounds very close versus very open. And so get the basics right. Make sure that you're engaging. Make sure that you put stuff out there that's fun. But, you can just enjoy the conversation. Think of it as a conversation with your friend. Next thing is use engaging content, okay? This is Keith's hierarchy of engaging content. What I want you to do is go build whatever your webinar is going to be. Go build it. And I want you to look at each of the slides, think about how you're delivering the slide, and then start at the bottom of the pyramid, wherever that slide is, and then try to see if you can move it up a little bit, all right? And so hey, Harsh, that's fantastic. Okay? You stand. That's a great example. Harsh, That's a fantastic example. I also used to stand, but I don't have a stand-up desk right now. So at the bottom of the pyramid is you are reading bullet 4, point 4, bullet 5. That's like my audience reaction is in the triangle. It's, oh, kill me now. I like, look, if you're gonna do that, I could just send me the deck. I'll read it myself. I don't. So if you have to do that, right? If you have to do that, then summarize the slide. Okay, don't go with reading the bullets because you're going to kill it. And Hassan, I actually am busy waving my hands around. So yes, I do. I do a lot of body language as I'm presenting. People can hear it, right? The next thing is a lot of times people use very complex language. They use compound sentences and things like that, or they speak in a monotone. And what happens? All the words blend together. You have to put in the breaks, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to see if you can get it to the middle of my pyramid here. It's passionate, it's enthusiastic, and it's enthusiastically human. Because minimally, even if you're presenting boring content, like some of the stuff I'm talking about today, it's enthusiastically human, right? It's enthusiastic, so as a result, it's entertaining, right? And then there's a couple of techniques I want you to think about doing because I think it'll help you. Right. So one of the things you could do is look at it and say, can you pose it as a rhetorical question? Because that will stop and cause me to think. Right. The next thing is, can you create a relevant image or grab a relevant image that captures the moment? Right. How many of you had a full belly laugh when you saw the cats? I know Greg did because he put LOL cats. Right. So you had a full belly. Right. But it made a relevant comment around it, and it paused. It caused you to think, and then you enjoy. Right. It's that pause that you have that relevant image. And then sometimes it's just that relevant personal story. It's that vulnerability. That's the wow, right? And the more you can kind of go toward that vulnerable story of, you know, I blew it. I've done so many webinars where things blew up on me. Those are great stories to tell in a webinar, right? Like, so those kinds of things, when you talk about engagements that you've done that went up and blew up and went sideways on you, and this is why we're doing the current approach. Because I think if you do this current approach, it's going to take you to this kind of outcome. That's a fantastic webinar for people. Does that make sense? It's different. See what you can do. Just look at your content. Say, where are you on the scale, and see if you can go up the scale. The next thing I want you to do is think about having a theme. Okay. And the idea of the theme is that, you know, you want people to come away from a webinar with one thing that they're going to remember, right? So today, you know, it's really, you know, you're competing for every second of somebody's time. You need to make it entertaining. You need to make it interesting as a result. That's really what we're talking about. But I also want you to remember that theme. Hey, this is like speaking to a friend. So introduce it. Today's webinar is about whatever. At some point in time when you're delivering any kind of presentation, your brain's going to go to mush, right? You're going to forget what you were talking about. You're going to be answering a question. You're going to drift, and then you got to bring it back. So just have that theme. Look, you're competing for every second, right? You can tell when I get lost because I'll say that, right? And then summarize the event with it. Does that make sense? Because what you're doing is just kind of unifying everything together with that one crisp color that's running through it. And that creates interest for people. It makes it easier to retain the content because you're kind of hanging it on, you know, one hanger that goes throughout. The next thing what you do is number 4, okay, is have a gift for your audience. Can people see how the slides today are going to be a useful takeaway, right? It's just like a checklist, right? And so that's number 1 in what you could have. There's also data in the slides that'll show up later, right? That's another reason why you might take this presentation and share it with friends. Because what you care about is not just the people that come. What you care about is somebody saying, look, you should go to that event. Because that's the reuse numbers. Like, so what happens is that I might have had, you know, 60,000 people in a year attending my events, but the reality is that there's maybe, you know, 10,000 more, 20,000 more, 30,000 more, 40,000 more that actually came into those events, but they listened to the recording of it, right? Because somebody told them, oh, you should listen to the recording. This is great content. So you have to keep it actionable, right? Maybe there's techniques or checklists in the slides that people want. There's templates or downloadables. I did a webinar in the appraisal industry, and we had this amazing toolkit that people could download. It was cool. It just request it from me and we'll give it to you. I'll tell you, PDUs, CDUs, right? Like if you're Project Management Institute or IIBA and you can get the content IIBA certified, for example, that will double your attendance rate. Isn't that cool? Right? Because people are going in and they're getting professional certification. Like they're getting you know, they're getting accreditation for attending that event. It'll, you know, significantly change. You know, or just asking people to give you a standing ovation. Can I get a standing ovation at the end of the section? I mean, fantastic. People are paying attention to it, right? You know, remember, it's also powerful to be human. You know, like it's this idea of, you know, it's not about me, the deliverer. It's about you, the audience, right? Like, I'm here for you. And if you have that firmly and foremost in your mind, you question, why am I presenting this? Am I presenting this for my benefit, or am I presenting it for your benefit? Am I creating that opportunity to banter with the audience? Like, Hassan and I seem to know each other at this point. Greg and I certainly know each other, and we're going to go for beers after this. But you know what I mean? Like, people have a sense of what's going on, right? You're part of a conversation that's happening out there. You have to show that you're listening. It's about being approachable. It's about, you know, like, as this show is ending, people want to talk to you. That's what this is about, because you want to solve also real problems with people. And when you do that, that's what makes you human. Does that make sense? So this is something that's like, when you do a webinar, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to put up the slide with the cats on it. It might be, you know, it's going to make some people annoying, but it's all, you know, but it's fun. It's showing who you are and what you care about in life. And that's what people engage with, and that's what makes it interesting. I want to ask you guys a question. Who has the most power in the room? Hey, and this is the audience participation time. Is the power the person speaking, or is it the person who's asking the questions? I want your votes. Put it in the Q&A, Eric. Come on. I'm getting questions from everybody else. Okay, the votes are starting to roll in. Is it the person speaking or the person asking the questions? Thank you, Greg. Jerry, I appreciate it. Bruce, yeah, that's it. No philosophy stuff. All right, look, 80% of you, Moria, and thank you. It's the person asking the questions. It's that senior executive, right? It's the person. So if I'm doing all the speaking and you have questions that I haven't answered, what happens? Yeah, exactly. Power shifts to you. You stop listening, right? Because I haven't answered those questions. And so a really powerful technique is what I just did, is where I ask that question and it forces engagement to the audience. And think of that, because you can use that as you go forward. You slow down the presentation. You ask whether it's rhetorical or not, but what it does is it releases that telling tension, right? You didn't have high engagement. When I asked that one question, all of a sudden 20 other people who hadn't said anything popped in and said something, right? Because I stopped and asked the question. It releases the telling tension. It brings the power back, and you refocus the group. Isn't that cool? You like that technique? It works. There you go. Person asking. There you go. Thank you. Now, here's one that I wanted to share with you, because I was looking for something that talks about follow-up. But once I did it, it's like follow-up is a verb, follow-up is a noun, follow-up is wrong. I picked this one because so often the follow-up is wrong. And then I put myself into a mental tailspin because I said the follow-up, and I had no idea, is that a noun, a verb, or is that wrong? So don't mind me, okay? But I just thought that was kind of fun. You got to make your webinars make money, right? What's the point of doing a webinar if you're not bringing it through to, I'm going to take something out there and try to turn this into cash? And so whether you're list building and you're doing lighter weight stuff, or whether you're trying to drive that into sales process, it's really all about the follow-up. And I'm slowing down here deliberately because, you know, the other stuff you can go back and it's checklists and stuff like that, and you can talk to me about it later, that sort of thing. This stuff here is critical, right? Because it's about the business of business. It's about the business of making money. And I want to pause and just go a little bit slower as I go through this content. Let me ask you something. By marketing, what are we really trying to do? You have to have a goal. But tell me what you think we're trying to do. And I know that's a tough question to ask, but if you could. Brand, that's fair. Absolutely. Brand is critical, but it's a piece of it, right? I'm going to challenge you and say, yeah, okay, there's another one, right? Brand, inform, engage, and fantastic. You're right, engage is a really, really good word. So when we're talking about where webinars begin to fit, right? What I want you to think about is you're buying new business, okay? By marketing and selling, we are buying new business. We have other things that keep our existing customers. We have project managers, we have inside sales stuff like, or we have account managers and stuff like that. But marketing and selling, what we're trying to do is we're trying to, and it's simplest, buy new business, okay? If I have a $50 million company and I want to grow it by 10 million, I have 10 million of new business that I need to buy. And I'm using my marketing and sales organization to buy that, right? So it's really all about how you can buy that as efficiently as possible. That's the easiest way to think of this. So as a result of that, the way it works from a math perspective is I have a cost per marketing qualified lead. That's MQL. I'm going to use that MQL term later because it has to be an input to this thing about generating opportunity. I have a conversion rate and I have a sales margin. So it's not just that I'm generating a name. I have to generate somebody that I can turn into sales margin at some point in time. Does that make sense, guys? I have cost per marketing qualified lead, I have a conversion rate, and I have sales margin that I'm going to generate. So if I'm dealing with something that is a $300 sale, right, I can't spend a huge amount on generating leads. I have to do webinars with 1,000, 1,500 people on them, right? I'm doing mass market webinars. I'm doing other kinds of thought leadership to drive, and I might be doing it with partners because that really brings down my overall cost of execution. The flip side of that is if I'm doing something where my average deal size is $100,000, I can actually spend quite a bit on the marketing side because I'm going to generate an opportunity at, that generates $50,000 for the margin. I'm going to close one in, say, 20 or something like this. So my ability to spend on that is quite high. That makes sense. Like, it's different. You have to think about it that way. The objective is to buy new business. To do that, you need to drive a usable business input. So the people coming onto the webinar need to know that this is directly aligned with what you're going to sell at some point in time. That's why that journey, the customer's journey, is so important. The next thing is I need to know how much I can spend on a lead. And the way you figure that out is either I have an existing cost of customer acquisition, CAC, that's what that means, customer acquisition cost, or I can take my marketing program cost, what I'm spending, and I can divide it by how much I'm going to grow my business, and that gives me a number, okay? Because I need to exceed that or do better than that number in the coming year, right? And so what I can do as well is I can also compete with my suppliers. I know my cost of per lead on one channel. This used to drive John nuts, by the way, over at Modern Analyst. I knew exactly what my costs were. And because I knew exactly what my costs were, I say, look, John, these are my costs, right? This is my cost per lead. Can you help me figure out how to get this down or do better or do at least comparable? This is where I'm buying leads. And webinars are almost invariably cheaper than most other lead channels. When you think about going on site to do a conference or something like that, you're $300 plus per lead, right? At least $300 plus per lead. That's just for the event. That's not counting, I have people I got to put on airplanes and all the annoyance around it, blah, 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 right? There's a lot of extra work you're putting into them versus a webinar, right? But I also compete my lead channels. Whether that person comes to me through a webinar or a, direct marketing or my sales organization, whatever, I'm always tracking that, right? In terms of, where am I getting my marketing qualified lead and where am I getting cost down? I want you to think about a webinar also as decomposing that big asset. People think, oh my God, it's a huge amount of work to do. A webinar is just a one-time event. No, wait. That's wrong. First of all, you can do that webinar 100 times, right? The same webinar event, like, back when I was doing very high volume work, and even most recently when I was in the appraisal field, we were running the same webinar event once every 6 weeks, right? And just do that. Like, why are you building an asset, which is really good, putting work into it, and only running it once? That's ridiculous, right? Run it every 6 weeks, put them in rotation. Whichever ones are performing the best, keep those and get rid of the rest, right? But the second thing is that think of your webinar as this is what I learned way back when I was running, I was an executive with International Data Corporation. You research once and then you publish many, many, many times. So think of this as your publication strategy. You're going to give to a junior person in your office, a student or whatever, listen to the webinar and rip it apart. Turn it into clickbait. Give me 50 tweets. Give me a couple of text extract posts. Give me some social media posts. You see how easy you could do that? Like, would you agree with me? Take a webinar, give it to a kid, turn it into tweets, social media posts, and extract posts. See how easy that is? Like, immediately you've got benefit because now all of a sudden you got audience acquisition in the social media space, clickbait, right? Does that make sense? Yes? Cool. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate you. The fastest one in here to respond. The next one is conversion assistance, okay? Take the webinar. You probably got one or two case studies in it. Turn those into downloadables, okay? That's going to help you in that sales conversion assistance. but also take the templates that you've got in it, like today I've got a bunch of templates, and just republish those on their own, right? Put it on the page where people can talk about going and attending the webinar so they can see the template, because that will bring people to that page. It will also create conversion assistance to the people downloading and actually listening to the recording of the webinar. But turn that also into sales messages, right? Because part of what's going on in the webinar is thought leadership, and you can just turn that into some emails and other things so that the salespeople can very easily support it and drive people to the recordings of the webinar. There also could be essential images from it that you can build brochureware around it. You see how that's conversion assistance? You're taking what you built in the webinar and turning it into usable assets that you're going to use to support the sales process around the webinar. Cool? Dead simple. By the way, the student does that, not you. You know, you built the webinar, get somebody else to do it, right? The next thing is the white papers, webinars, and the toolkit, the giveaway, right? Webinars are dead easy to turn into white papers. Somebody just listens to the event, you got a whole whack of slides, you got a bunch of graphics, turn it into a white paper, right? It's downloadable, clickable. That's fun. I mean, now you got more than one asset, right? You got more than one thing that can be registered to listen to. The second thing is you don't have to listen, you don't have to do the event live. There was an unfortunate situation where I was doing very high volume work for one organization, and they had all the recordings, and my future boss got really mad because the other company kept playing the recordings of the webinar, so it looked like I still worked there. And Keith, why are you still working at this other? But they were just playing the recordings until they could get it done. It was the funniest thing. But you know, like, you don't have to have each one of these things live, you know. So you can have not only the webinar, but not only the recording of the webinar on a site, but you can replay the recorded webinar and it'll sound like a live event, right? As long as you're not referring to things that are actually in real life happening, right? And then the third thing is have the toolkit or giveaway that goes with it, because that's another downloadable. I'm going to watch the event, but I want to get the sales kit that goes with it, or I want to get the design thing that goes with it, or something like that. And that just increases the actual registration rate, because you need stuff that's going to register for access. You see how what this is doing is it's creating a content strategy, right? You're using the webinar build to fuel content types, because the webinar in and of itself is an end-to-end thing, right? It's well thought through, it's got structure to it, it's got a storyboard behind it, it's got stuff that people are going to learn, but then you can use that to fuel many different things. The next part is fueling that critical follow-up, okay? And this is where it starts to get a lot more sophisticated. Most of you or some of you will have marketing automation systems. And if you don't, that's fine. There's things that you do and then things you don't do. But what you're trying to do is get to what's called a marketing qualified lead. And that's somebody that fits a particular lead definition. So in the prior company was a manager and above, in a company with more than 500 employees. They had to be in North America. They couldn't be in certain industries, like they didn't want them in defense or government, et cetera, et cetera. And they had to work for a company of more than 500, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a few other, and they had to be engaging our content to a certain level. That was a marketing qualified lead. Now, there's going to be a bunch of people who don't or will never fit that definition. It'll be everything from, somebody in geography I just don't sell to, or somebody with an email address called mickey@mouse.com, which is fine. Let them attend the webinar. Who cares, right? People get fixated on a .com address. Don't worry about that. They'll give it to you. If they give you the actual address, and it's a commercial address, then that's just an invitation to call them, right? But like those people need to go into one channel of follow-up. You have their marketing qualified lead that goes into another channel of follow-up, and then you have the people who exceed the MQL definition. They're either much more senior, they're much more engaged, like Hassan today is very, very engaged. Greg, very engaged. I should probably give them both a follow-up call afterwards, right? Because they're more excited about the content, right? And so those people you have to have a different tracking for. They're the people who talk with you during the event and are senior executives, right? So when you stream it out that way, like if I give my sales organization 1,000 leads, what's going to happen? They're going to keel over and die, right? Okay, I've got a small organization, 1,000 leads, they go, and they just can't do anything. But if I give them 10 leads, what happens? Think they're going to call them? Oh, hell yeah. There you go. Thank you very much, right? Thank you very much. You said that. That's great. I appreciate it. Yeah, oh, hell yeah. I appreciate that. Because they will. If you give them too much, then it's just going to be a problem, right? And so you need to start thinking about it from the perspective of what's the narrowest slice. Like if you go to a conference or a some sort of online thing, and you get 4 people that you really talk to and you're really excited about, right? That's considered good. So you had 12 people in your webinar. Who are the 10? Who are the 20? Who are the 100 that really become the ones that you want to focus in on? That's where you start trying your special sauce on. The next thing is to tie it into the existing journey. And this is what drives me crazy, okay? You attend a webinar, and the very next day you get this thing saying, buy now. Come on, guys, what are you doing? You got a website that theoretically converts, it's got a customer journey associated with it. And theoretically, it's great it's architected to take people in on certain pages, take them to other pages, and get them to convert into a lead or get them to convert into a sales opportunity where they can, demo and stuff like that. That's what it's designed for, right? Why aren't you tying it into an existing journey, an existing customer journey? Instead, what people do is they send these emails and follow up that say, buy now, buy now, buy now. Like, do you want a demo? Do you want a demo? Do you want a demo? No, you're bringing them in on a thought leadership strategy. Your follow-up should be more educational. Hey, you attended this event. Would you like this case study? Hey, you attended this thing. Would you like this other thing that you could go to? Or, hey, you attended this event. Would you want a slide deck? Do you want this? Do you want this? Get people to come to the buffet a couple of times and then bring it back. Does that make sense? Don't try to sell too fast off of a webinar, because there's going to be time for that. You can bring them into their site, let them self-educate that a little bit more. Those people going to that event are naturally more interested in self-education. Does that make sense as you go through? And we're going to have some great time for questions because I'm just barreling through this content. Listen, 5th, thought leadership is part of the long-term strategy, okay? It's thought leadership actually materially changes the value of a company. 61% of decision makers say they're willing to pay a premium price. So this actually is an Edelman piece of research that was done in 2019. I love it. But I've experienced this. So when I was with Ross and the guys over at IAG, when I first started, or they bought my company actually, we were doing about $30,000 was our average deal size. But after implementing our thought leadership strategy and doing all these webinars and stuff like that, our average deal size, excluding the outliers like $6 million, $2 million, $4 million deals, our average deal size was actually $300,000. So people are willing to pay you more. They also don't expect to see you before they buy. I once had a CIO say, hey, Keith, listen, you're doing a $2 million deal. You think you can get on an airplane and come down here? That's particularly relevant today, right, when you think about it, right? It's totally different today versus what it was. 58%. So when you're also in a thought leadership strategy and you're adopting these ideas, you totally change the way you strategically sell. Okay, so you're able to engage that C-suite executive a little easier, right? Because if they read it or they see it or they participate in it, they're willing to share their contact information. If a director attends an event and gives you, I'm a director and I work at General Motors, they're begging to get called if they attend and they participate and you see them in the Q&A area, right? Because they've participated with it. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of them will also award the business based on the perception of your company as a thought leader. And it materially changes then the value of your company, right? So when you sell it, or if you were to go to market and look for investment, and people are saying, yeah, these guys are fantastic, they're thought leaders, that materially alters the valuation of the company. And then buyers get 57% of the way through the buying process before they ever make contact. I mean, that is the new world of buyers are so much better educated today than they ever have been in the past, okay? So they become self-educating. They want to understand more about it. So when you do a webinar, it's not just about your content, it's about how your content aligns to that buying journey, because you want to take them through faster. You want to take them through earlier so they become more self-educated. So what did I promise to talk about? Hey, it's a crash course in doing webinars. And I went through a little fast today, but that's okay. Every once in a while, I get in and you just get going. And today I got motoring a little bit fast. So what did I promise to talk about? I promised to talk about tried and tested step-by-step. By the way, just throw your questions in the Q&A area and I'll have a little bit of time to pick them up. It's step-by-step. How do you wire your audience? How do you do a webinar that really grabs people's attention and interest and then shifts it? And so much of that is about how you structure it. So it's about putting yourself out there. It's about making sure you're focused on interesting stuff, but it's also, can you line up your product journey? And that's really revolutionizing how you build a webinar. How you build a webinar is so much more into looking at that customer journey, look at the gaps your product fills and talk to those gaps, because that's relatable, that's interesting, that's a broader question than simply your product. Look at the rubric, what makes it good or bad in a particular area in terms of execution in that space, because that's what your product is all about, the good or the bad, and just talk to that issue, because that's not necessarily about you, that's about the market, that's about industry, that's about best practices, and you focus in on that. And that's what drives webinars, that's what drives people toward a buying pattern. And then let's focus on what content sells and balancing promotion. When you think about it, it's about making sure that you get the context of industry right around the cat sitting on the post. And I'm going to know that of all the things you're going to remember from this is that cat sitting on a post that you're going to remember, right? Balance that promotion. Don't make it so much about you. Make it much more about them. Make it much more about the industry. Make it much more about what's going on around them, okay? And then that gets you into something that's actually going to convert, right? That gets you into something that's going to convert the leads into sales, okay, versus something that's completely disconnected from what it is that you do for a living. So with that, look, I've got some time to pick up more of the questions coming in. And certainly I know there's a series of them that came in as we were going, but this is a great opportunity for you to pick them up. If you want the deck, and I know most people stayed, so in fact all of them stayed, my email address is on this last slide. That's my personal one, mail@keithellis.me. Just send me a note. I will turn around and send you my deck. That's fine. You can also reach out to Modern Analyst and ask them to send the deck, and that's fantastic. They'll send it over to you, and it may be in one of the downloadables today as well. But what this is really all about is making sure that you can win in getting customers, because when you build a webinar, there's so many more things you can do with it. So Harsh, you had a question here. Can you please talk about how you use free webinars for generating engagement for paid online events? So I have done a fair bit of that. The issue for you when you're using free webinars for generating engagements for a paid event, your list building. Right, so you need to talk to the areas around which the event is being driven, right? So the value of your company when you're doing events and meetups and things like that, the value of your company is really about the size of your list, right? And so you're going to run as many events as you can, virtual events as you can, that are related to the topics that you're solving from a paid event, to continue to drive higher and higher and higher levels of traffic, so that you can get more and more people that you can market the paid event to. Effectively, that's what the game is that you're playing. So if you work that well, so what happened for me, and I'll give you a story. Remember when Lehman Brothers crashed? It's in around 2008. We were running about 60,000 attendees a month to, a year to our events, attendees to our events. So huge volumes. We were driving 200 net new leads a week. What happened is Lehman happened and it blew up. The financial meltdown that happened, it blew up everything. And so our company just hadn't done any business for like 6 months, hadn't closed anything. So immediately the marketing budgets dried up. So what I did is I monetized it. I flipped it around into a paid event. The only reason I could do that is because my internal list, what I had internally to market to, had gone from basically 10,000 or less, something like 8,000 names that we could barely market to, because we could barely send emails, to something like 120,000 people who we were routinely in conversation with, right? Routinely connected with. Well, that gave us this powerhouse of communication. We were able to broadcast and continue to talk, a lot. And so that whole thing is a strategy that really, really, really works well, right? It's just flip it around. So here's another one that's coming in is the marketing automation systems in the follow-up side. There are a bunch of marketing automation systems that are out there that will automate the follow-up side. There's Pardo, which is a Salesforce product. There's a lot of them out there. And so they don't have to be like super expensive in terms of what they will do. But like some people use very simplistic ones, like MailChimp and stuff like that. But I think what you're trying to do is get something that will actually determine or detect that somebody's on your website, that they're following up and they're hitting certain content and things like that. And so that's my recommendation is, yes, do get a marketing automation system, and you just Google marketing automation systems and you'll see a whack of them out there. I've got a few favorites. I just don't want to make this a marketing event for those guys. In terms of the actual execution on webinars, Jerry, yeah, so if you're running an event, you can run them basically every 6 weeks, if that works for you. Like, you can take the same event, because people will miss it and they prefer to go to the live, right? So run the event and then put it in a rotation on a 6-week increment, because people will come back and they may not have been ready the first time, and they'll say, like, is this recorded? Yeah, it's recorded, but then you remarket it out there. You'll find, hey, all of a sudden it's completely different people, about the same audience size, and you'll run it in 6 weeks. And then you change your media partner, right? You'll run it in one media and then you change it to another. By doing that, you can actually repurpose the same event and run it many, many, many times. But more importantly than that, I'm going to tell you this. Remember that one slide I put up that talks to how you take one webinar and break it down? So way back in the day, this is a different company. Again, another high volume one where we've gone from not really a lot of marketing to a whole lot of greatness. And we grew that company remarkably. We were basically doing that strategy of breaking it down. And in the beginning, we weren't getting anything through social media. But by the end, because of that strategy, not only did we have very, very high volume, but 60% of my new first touches were through social media. So they would have come in through LinkedIn. They would have come in through online presence. They would have come in through other types of social media like Twitter activity. And they're being driven to landing pages. And so what ended up happening is that by breaking that big content stuff down into little blocks that people could consume, we actually enabled our social media strategy. So people weren't sending out tweets and stuff like that on meaningless stuff. It was all very connected to things that people could attend, material that was on a site, and so it created a much more fluid customer journey through to the buying process. So it's really good that way, right? So think of the webinar as one asset. Cost per lead. So when we were doing it, our average deal size was in the 300,000 range. As I'd mentioned, my cost per lead got down below 42 bucks with that one company. So you can get the cost per lead quite low. So versus a conference, conference cost per lead is probably about $300 to $500 depending on the event. In fact, it can be considerably higher than that depending on what you're doing. And so my recommendation always is toward online or virtual. And I find that a lot of online conferences, you're in a mix of a bunch of other stuff. So it tends not to work so well versus a webinar, which is a much, much more focused kind of thing. And I find that with webinars, you tend to get a lot more traction much faster. So with that, look, I mean, there's just a huge number of questions, but if you do have other ones, just ask them in the Q&A area. I'll leave that open for another minute or so if people want. I'll leave the webinar open for another minute or so as people can ask questions and come in and stuff like that. And I'll get back to you with the answers like next week or something like that. But with that, let me wish you all great success, and thanks for taking the time out to attend today. Cheers.